April 22, 1945. Deep beneath the Reich Chancellery Garden, in the suffocating confines of the Führerbunker, 50 feet underground, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel stands ramrod straight. His uniform is immaculate, medals glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights, his face a mask of unyielding confidence. He gazes directly into the eyes of Adolf Hitler, the man he has served with abject devotion for over a decade, and unleashes a torrent of meticulously crafted lies. Hitler, hollow-eyed and trembling with rage after receiving news of the failed counteroffensive, demands answers. Why has SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner's promised counterattack, meant to pierce the Soviet lines from the northeast, failed so spectacularly? Why has the relief of Berlin not materialized as pledged? Why isn't General Theodore Bussy's Ninth Army breaking through from the south to rescue the crumbling capital, where street fighting already rages block by block? Keitel, who has pored over the unvarnished situation reports from the front lines, knows the grim truth all too well. Steiner's force, cobbled together from scattered SS and Wehrmacht remnants, is a ragged band of perhaps 5,000 exhausted men, many unarmed or equipped with scavenged rifles and little more than Volkssturm militiamen pressed into service. The Ninth Army, once a formidable 100,000-strong formation, is now encircled south of Berlin, disintegrating under relentless Soviet assaults from Zhukov's First Belarusian Front, its remnants fighting desperately for survival rather than launching any offensive. No relief is coming. Soviet forces number over 2.5 million with 6,250 tanks and 41,600 artillery pieces arrayed against Berlin's skeletal defenders. Berlin will fall within days, perhaps hours, as T-34s and IS-2 heavies grind inexorably closer. Yet Keitel, the man derisively nicknamed Lackey Keitel, by his peers for his fawning obedience, delivers exactly what his Führer craves. Mein Führer, he intones with calm assurance, his voice steady despite the distant thunder of artillery shaking the bunker's concrete walls. These are merely temporary setbacks, communication glitches with forward units amid the chaos of the encirclement. Steiner's troops are regrouping as we speak. The attack will resume imminently with fresh impetus. The Ninth Army is conducting a fighting withdrawal and will soon link up with General Walther Wenck's 12th Army, that improvised force of barely trained conscripts and rear-echelon personnel. United, they will shatter the Soviet noose and restore the front. Victory remains within our grasp. Every syllable is a fabrication, a deliberate distortion spun from whole cloth, ignoring the Führer directives Keitel himself had issued ordering impossible stands. Hitler, desperate for any shred of hope amid the encroaching apocalypse, the acrid smell of burning fuel seeping into the bunker, the wail of Stuka sirens long silenced, laps it up. He nods, his face softening from fury to fleeting resolve, and returns to his maps, shuffling phantom divisions like pieces on a chessboard, plotting relief thrusts that exist only in his inflamed imagination. Keitel watches, feeling no twinge of guilt, no flicker of shame, only a cold satisfaction. He has pleased his master, secured his indispensability in these final hours, and bought another day of futile resistance. Another day of German boys, some as young as 12 from the Hitler Youth, dying in rubble-strewn streets for illusions, their bodies piled in makeshift barricades. Another day delaying the inevitable surrender that might have spared countless lives, including those of the 1.5 million Berlin civilians trapped in the crossfire. This was Wilhelm Keitel, the ultimate yes-man, whose pathological deceit had propped up Hitler's fantasies for years, from the early triumphs of 1939 to the cataclysm of 1945. His lies didn't just obscure reality, they poisoned it, rendering rational strategy impossible, dooming the Wehrmacht to self-destruction through overextension and attrition, and condemning hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, to unnecessary slaughter on frozen steppes, scorched cities, and blood-soaked beaches. Keitel's fabrications in the bunker's twilight hours were no aberration but the culmination of a distinct pathology endemic to authoritarian militaries, where loyalty trumps competence and truth becomes treason. Hitler's own delusions often stemmed from self-deception, a willful immersion in his messianic fantasies of a thousand-year Reich sustained by racial destiny and unyielding will. Keitel's, by contrast, were coldly cynical. He knew the truth, having signed off on countless operational orders himself. He devoured intelligence reports from the Abwehr and Fremdheer Ost, grasped the strategic quagmire of multi-front warfare, and recognized the futility of Hitler's orders, which demanded miracles from depleted divisions averaging 30 to 40% strength. Yet he lied reflexively, systematically, because his career, identity, and psyche were fused to one imperative: pleasing the Führer at any cost, even as it meant endorsing the Commissar Order for executing Soviet political officers or the Nacht und Nebel decree vanishing resistance fighters into oblivion. This made Keitel not just weak, incompetent, or cowardly, though he embodied all three, lacking the field experience of frontline commanders, but actively malignant. His deceptions amplified Hitler's worst impulses, hubris-fueled gambles like splitting Army Group South in 1942, stifled any reality check from subordinates, and transformed strategic blunders into operational nightmares that bled Germany dry. By shielding Hitler from defeat's sting, Keitel prolonged a lost war by at least 6 months after Stalingrad, maximizing Germany's devastation, cities leveled, 5.3 million Wehrmacht dead or missing, and the Holocaust's machinery running unchecked under the cover of endless, final offensives. To grasp this betrayal, one must trace Keitel's improbable ascent from mediocrity to catastrophe's architect, a rise greased by bureaucratic savvy rather than martial genius. Born on August 22, 1882, in the rural village of Helmskerode near Gandersheim in the Duchy of Brunswick, Wilhelm Bodwin Johann Gustav Keitel was the eldest son of Karl Keitel, a prosperous estate owner and devout Lutheran who pushed his son toward a military career to instill discipline and secure social standing. Entering the Imperial German Army in 1901 as a one-year volunteer, Keitel was commissioned as a lieutenant in the prestigious 6th Artillery Regiment in Potsdam, where he honed administrative skills amid the rigid Prusso-German officer corps. By World War I, he had risen to captain and served primarily as a staff officer on the Western Front, coordinating logistics for the 4th Guards Infantry Division and earning the Iron Cross Second Class for efficient supply management during the 1914 Marne counteroffensive, though he was wounded twice, at Verdun in 1916 and later in Flanders, limiting his combat exposure. Post-war, amid the Weimar Republic's turmoil, 1918-33, Keitel navigated the Reichswehr's straitjacket existence under the Versailles Treaty's 100,000-man cap with steady, if uninspired, promotions, holding administrative posts like Chief of Staff to the 2nd Cavalry Division and instructor at the War Academy in Dresden, where he emphasized organizational theory over innovative tactics. His strengths lay in paperwork and politics, balancing shoestring budgets amid hyperinflation, shuffling personnel amid political purges, and sidestepping ideological minefields as the Nazis rose, quietly joining the party in 1933 for career insurance. In 1935, Keitel assumed the innocuous role of head of the Wehrmachtsamt in the War Ministry under Werner von Blomberg, a bureaucratic coordinator bridging the Army, Navy, and nascent Luftwaffe, managing inter-service rivalries and procurement disputes. It was a glove fit for his temperament, orderly, subservient, averse to confrontation, with a penchant for detailed memos that masked his aversion to bold decisions. He thrived in the shadows of power, far from the perils of independent command, earning Blomberg's trust through unflinching loyalty. Then came 1938, a pivot of doom. Amid the Blomberg-Fritsch scandal, fabricated sex scandals orchestrated by Himmler to consolidate control, Hitler dismantled the War Ministry, birthing the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, as his personal military staff on February 4. With himself as supreme commander, Hitler installed the unassuming 55-year-old Keitel as chief of the OKW, bypassing more qualified generals like Ludwig Beck. On paper, this elevated Keitel to top advisor, ostensibly overseeing unified strategy. In truth, it demoted the military to an extension of Hitler's whim, centralizing power under the Führerprinzip of absolute obedience. The OKW's mandate? Not strategy or counsel, but execution, translating the Führer's edicts, often scribbled on napkins during late-night monologues, into orders, coordinating their rollout across fractious services, and rubber-stamping his visions without dissent, while Jodl handled day-to-day operations. Keitel embraced this servitude with zeal, reportedly tearfully thanking Hitler for the honor in a sycophantic letter. It flattered his need for clear hierarchy, absolved him of strategic accountability. He later claimed, "I was only the mouthpiece," and positioned him at power's elbow, with a lavish office in the Bendlerblock and a direct line to the Berghof. For Germany, it was a disaster. The man filtering war's truths was allergic to them, his reports sanitized to align with Hitler's racial worldview rather than frontline realities. Keitel's deceptions crystallized during the Reich's early conquests, setting the template for catastrophe. As Hitler eyed the Anschluss with Austria, March 1938, the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia via Munich, September 1938 to March 1939, and the invasion of Poland, September 1, 1939, he solicited military verdicts in tense Obersalzberg briefings. Was the Wehrmacht primed for blitzkrieg? Were risks, such as British naval superiority or Polish cavalry charges exaggerated in propaganda, tolerable? Keitel, ever the optimist for hire, delivered glowing endorsements, capabilities overstated, hazards downplayed to mere technical adjustments. The Wehrmacht was formidable, its blitzkrieg innovations like radio-coordinated panzer divisions lethal in exercises, but Keitel buried the caveats from the Truppenamt, such as inadequate reserves or fuel stocks limited by synthetic oil shortages. When Army High Command (OKH) officers like Franz Halder voiced alarms, overstretched logistics across the Sudetenland, untested doctrines against fortified lines, he branded them defeatists in private memos, assuring Hitler that German elan and superior morale would conquer all, echoing the Führer's pseudoscientific faith in willpower over material. This template, optimism as loyalty, hardened into habit, its toll mounting with each triumph's illusion. Poland's fall in 5 weeks masked the Luftwaffe's 40% bomber losses, sowing seeds for later air inferiority. Throughout the war, Keitel's briefings painted a Wehrmacht of steel where rot festered beneath, his daily Führer conferences a ritual of reassurance. Hitler probed facts, troop levels, down to 70 divisions by 1943 from 175 in 1941, equipment stocks, Panzer IV production lagging behind T-34 outputs, readiness metrics amid Allied bombing campaigns. The German bureaucracy, obsessively meticulous under the OKW's Wirtschaftsstab, supplied raw data, divisions at 60% strength after Dieppe raids, tank regiments hobbling on a third of their 200-vehicle complement due to alloy shortages, infantry starved for NCOs after 2 million casualties, Luftwaffe squadrons grounded by fuel famine from U-boat failures. Keitel, privy to it all via Jodl's operations staff, alchemized truth into mirage in his clipped, precise reports. Understrength units became combat-ready, with high spirits, ammunition shortages, logistical hiccups solvable by Volk ingenuity. Field reports from Heeresgruppen screamed of attrition, exhausted ranks in the Caucasus, shoddy replacements from the Ersatzier averaging 18-year-olds with 12 weeks training, eroding morale as desertion spiked to 35,000 monthly, but Keitel sanitized them, feeding Hitler a diet of delusion laced with maps showing unbroken blue arrows. Strategies birthed in this vacuum, ambitious thrusts like Case blew into the oil fields, unyielding holds at Kursk, crashed against reality, squandering lives and material in futile pyres that consumed 80% of Germany's steel output by 1944. Why persist in this web of falsehoods? Fear was the whip, Hitler's tantrums, screaming fits lasting hours, veins bulging as he pounded tables, felled truth-tellers, branding them cowards or traitors, exiling them to oblivion, or worse, like the post-July 1944 purges claiming 5,000 lives. Keitel, scarred by these spectacles since the 1938 Hossbach Memorandum debates, opted for safety and sycophancy, once confiding to aides his dread of the Führer's unpredictable moods. Ambition was the carrot, proximity to the Führer brought prestige, a grand wedding for his son funded by Göring, influence over promotions, and a footnote in history as the Führer's sword-bearer. Keitel craved Hitler's nod, the validation of the indispensable aide, who smoothed paths with Himmler, silenced doubters in the OKH, and executed without qualm, earning the moniker, the nodding ass, from Goebbels' diaries. Ideology sealed the pact. No firebrand Nazi like Dietrich, Keitel nonetheless swallowed the mythos after 1933, Aryan supremacy justifying Lebensraum, Hitler's intuitive genius over bookish generals, victories' inevitability through Wunderwaffen like the V2. Problems weren't facts, they were faithlessness, as in his endorsement of the 1941 Barbarossa Commissar Order. His lies morphed into optimism, deceit into devotion, a classic enabler's sleight, recasting betrayal as virtue, much like Ribbentrop's diplomatic fictions. Keitel's distortions didn't whisper, they roared through the war's pivotal fiascos, each a monument to mendacity. Operation Barbarossa, June 22, 1941. As Hitler fixated on Moscow in Directive 21, OKH planners like Halder flagged perils, 1,800-mile supply lines vulnerable to partisans, winters bite with troops in summer kit, Soviet reserves swelling to 5 million via Lend-Lease. Keitel nodded in private staff meetings, acknowledging the 153 Division gambles risks, then briefed Hitler on triumphs foreordained, logistics adequate, with 600,000 horses and 625,000 trucks, half non-operational by September, objectives achievable, in a 3-month campaign despite intelligence underestimating 360 Soviet divisions. The invasion surged 600 miles in weeks, then stalled, trucks mired in Pripyat marshes, troops frostbitten in -40°C blizzards without winter gear, the Eastern Front a meat grinder of attrition claiming 775,000 German casualties by December. Predictable doom, concealed by Keitel's gloss, as he later admitted in memoirs, themselves laced with lies, suppressing Halder's September warnings. Stalingrad, autumn 1942. The Sixth Army under Paulus, bled white in urban hell with 1.5 million total casualties across the front, flanked by Soviet pincers massing 1 million troops for Operation Uranus. Intelligence from Fremdheer Ost screamed encirclement, withdrawal to the Don begged mercy, as Paulus radioed for airlifts. Keitel diluted the dread in October briefings, limited threats from inferior Soviet forces, strong flanks, held by shaky Romanian allies with obsolete artillery, dooming 300,000 to the Volga's maw, where Göring's Luftwaffe airlift delivered just 105 tons daily against 700 needed. Their February 6, 1943, surrender, 91,000 POWs, Paulus promoted to Field Marshal in a suicide inducement, shattered the Wehrmacht's aura, with Keitel signing the no-retreat Führer order that sealed it. The Atlantic Wall, 1943–44. Hitler's coastal bulwark, touted in propaganda reels as invasion-proof with 15,000 concrete emplacements, was a facade, gaps yawning in Normandy's bocage, reserves thin at 58 divisions scattered from Norway to Biscay. Rommel's December 1943 inspection as Inspector West revealed horrors, beach obstacles incomplete, artillery batteries undermanned, mines totaling just 6 million against 10 million needed. He demanded a hedgehog every meter. These pleas reached Keitel via OKW dispatches, who repackaged them in January 1944 briefings as steady progress under von Rundstedt, with adequate readiness, despite labor shortages from 7 million forced workers diverted to V weapons. D-Day, June 6, 1944, exposed the sham, beaches breached within hours by 156,000 allies, Normandy lodgment expanding to 2 million by August, France's liberation accelerated as Paris rose in revolt. Ardennes Offensive, December 16, 1944. The Bulges' desperation gamble, Unternehmen walked am Rhein to split the Allies at Bastogne, seize Antwerp's port, demanded 30 divisions, only 18 at half strength, 1,800 tanks, delivered 1,000, many refurbished Panthers, and 1,500 aircraft. Luftwaffe mustered 1,800 sorties total. Keitel vouched for fuel, just 60% allocated, phantom tanks from Ardennes factories, Luftwaffe ghosts under Gallen's protests. Initial shock, fog of war yielding 50 miles, yielded to collapse, reserves drained by Patton's Third Army relief, Ardennes a graveyard of Germany's last gasp with 100,000 casualties for 600 square miles gained and lost. Each lie birthed a tragedy, Hitler's fantasies operationalized into obituary lists totaling 4 million German dead by war's end. Keitel didn't monopolize Hitler's ear, but he gate-kept it with iron efficiency. As OKW chief, he curated briefings in the Wolf's Lair or Rassenburg, vetted reports from field marshals like von Brauchitsch, sacked 1941 for heart trouble, framed narratives with selective appendices, crafting an echo chamber of affirmation where Soviet steamroller myths justified Barbarossa delays. Pessimists were sidelined, Halder dismissed 1942 for defeatism, flatterers ascended like model for fanatical defenses. Hitler, intolerant of dissent since the 1938 putsch fears, amplified the filter with his "no generals plots" mantra, but Keitel institutionalized it, dishonesty as currency in promotion boards, candor as career suicide, as seen in the 1944 purge executing 4,980 suspected conspirators. This spawned a vicious symbiosis, a feedback loop of delusion. Keitel's affirmations emboldened Hitler's hubris, ever grander schemes like splitting forces at Stalingrad, severing him further from the front's carnage via secure teletype isolation. Keitel, cornered by his own precedents, doubled down, feasible impossibilities in Directive 51, victorious routes in phantom Ardennes maps. The loop tightened, reality receding like the Wehrmacht's lines, 800 miles by Elbe in 1945, the Reich unraveling in firestorms from Allied bombers dropping 1.4 million tons. Keitel's defenders, sparse and unconvincing, like his Nuremberg lawyer Otto Nelt, cry entrapment, truth meant dismissal, arrest, death amid the Gestapo's 7,000 executions post-Wehrmacht. Yet dismissal is not equal to damnation, many survived with honor. Peers like Erich von Manstein, brilliant Crimean strategist, argued Kursk feint 1943, dismissed March 1944 but authored Lost Victories memoir upholding ethics, Heinz Guderian, panzer pioneer of Achtung Panzer, clashed on Eastern Front Reserves 1941, exiled December 1941 then recalled 1943 only to be sacked January 1945 for nerves. Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, moderated Atlantic defenses with realistic assessments, arrested post-July 20 plot but survived to advise NATO, and Claus. Von Stauffenberg, operations chief who planted the Rassenburg bomb, executed August 1944 in a hail of pistol shots, navigated the abyss without wholesale mendacity. They balanced candor with cunning, Manstein's backhand blow proposals, Guderian's tank production pleas, integrity with survival, even facing firing squads. Keitel chose abdication, his perch atop OKW a pulpit squandered, with 200 subordinates at beck and call. With Hitler's ear in 50-plus conferences yearly, he could have tempered folly like urging Barbarossa logistics, proposed pivots post-Dieppe, pierced the veil on Holocaust reports crossing his desk. Instead, ambition's thrall, his family's evacuation privileges, fear's grip, trembling during rages, and diluted dogma, anti-Bolshevism justifying Einsatzgruppen atrocities he initialed, forged a collaborator, not a counselor. Systems devour the weak, but enablers like Keitel feed them, his signature on 1941's Barbarossa Directive enabling 27 million Soviet deaths. Surrendered in May 1945 after Hitler's suicide, Keitel, now acting Reich defense minister under Donitz, flew to Reims for negotiations, demanding partial capitulation to save the East from Soviets. Eisenhower's demand for unconditional terms left him no choice. He faced Nuremberg's bar from November 1945, indicted November 19 alongside 21 others for crimes against peace, planning aggression, war crimes, violations of war laws like POW executions, crimes against humanity, deportations, mass murder, and conspiracy. His plea, just following orders, as a loyal soldier, not political leader, crumbled under Justice Robert Jackson's cross-examination, revealing Keitel's proactive role, initialing the 1939 X-Report Sabotage Directive, the 1940 French armistice terms in Compiègne's railcar, the 1941 Barbarossa invasion order mobilizing 3 million troops. He wasn't implementer alone. His lies shaped policy via optimistic Führer briefs, greenlit atrocities like the 1942 Lidice reprisal, 1,300 Czechs killed, prolonged perdition by vetoing 1943 peace feelers. Guilty on all 4 counts October 1, 1946, unlike Speer, who escaped death for remorse, hanged October 16 in a whitewashed gymnasium, his last words a pious prayer, for God and fatherland. The noose fit, retribution for soldiers slain on altars of deceit, from 91,000 at Stalingrad to 80,000 in Berlin's ruins. Historians revile him as sycophancy incarnate, a lackey whose ethical void, per shire, enabled apocalypse, studied in West Point and Sandhurst as the anti-model. No Macbeth, Keitel was everyman amplified, middling mind, no general staff polish, quailing heart, family photos his solace, approval's addict amid social awkwardness at Berghof galas. Socially ill at ease, conflict-phobic, he once fainted at a 1939 parade, he craved Hitler's bomb, praise as panacea, like the 1940 Ritterkreuz Award. In Nazism's maw, these frailties metastasized, small evasions, falsifying 1938 Czech readiness, snowballed into systemic sabotage, each OKW order a moral step down. Authoritarians thrive on such ordinariness, careerists compromising incrementally, until corruption calcifies like the Commissar Order's 1941 destruction of evidence. Keitel's arc, dutiful officer to delusions dealer, remolded by 1938's OKW oath. Each nod to Hitler eased the next, Barbarossa assurances, Stalingrad holds, beyond redemption. The horror? No villainy required, mere humanity, misplaced in a system rewarding, yes, over, yet, sufficed to forge a war criminal. Even in April 1945's Inferno, Soviets coiling around a skeletal garrison of 80,000, Wehrmacht dregs, fanatical SS like the Nordland Division, Hitler Youth with Panzerfausts, Volkssturm elders clutching 1871 Mausers, Keitel peddled miracles in daily bunker huddles. Wenck's 12th Army? A 20,000-man mirage of sailors and cooks, pinned afar by Konev's first Ukrainian front, never closer than 30 miles. 9th Army's breakout? An encircled phantom under Bussy, reduced to 12,000 after the Silo Heights slaughter. As shells pulverized the Spree, 7,000 tons of ordnance daily, civilians perished in cellars by the thousands from rape, starvation, and suicide. Keitel's fictions fueled Hitler's suicide pact, ordering scorched earth demolitions under the Nero Decree. April 30th, Führer falls by his own Walther PPK, cyanide vial shattering on Eva Braun's lips. May 8th, Keitel signs capitulation in Berlin's Karlshorst, uniform crisp amid Soviet toasts, facade fracturing as he mutters of honorable defeat. Hierarchies filter upward, bad news buried in redacted OKW telegrams, biases baked in by racial briefings. Keitel's OKW rewarded spin via the Wehrmachtführungsstab, starved substance in propaganda-laced situation maps. Reform demands safeguards, whistleblower shields like USIG hotlines, dissent's incentives in promotion criteria, realities anchors via independent audits. Enablers aren't architects but aren't absolved, Hitler's main camp rants inert without Keitel's operationalization. Keitel's culpability scales with knowledge, total, from decrypted enigma intercepts, power, vast, commanding 18 million served, agency, forfeited for a Field Marshal baton. Graduated guilt, yes, but his grave, execution-worthy, as Jackson argued, the real complaining party is civilization. From Byzantine courtiers whispering to Justinian, to Soviet satraps like Beria concealing famines, yes, men recur in power's pathologies. Keitel's extremity, sustained over 2,000 days, stake-searing with 70 to 85 million war dead, spotlights the peril. Militaries, NATO doctrines now mandate, red teams, bureaucracies, post-Watergate reforms, firms, Enron's echo chambers, must prize truth over toadying, or risk self-immolation. Keitel's lies weren't footnotes, they were the war's hidden engine, strategies unmoored from Clausewitzian friction, capabilities conjured from 1938's Hausbach to 1945's Phantom Armies, a doomed Reich's death throes extended by 18 months post-Normandy. By insulating Hitler from defeat, his genius unchallenged till the end, Keitel operationalized delusion, harvesting millions in vain, 3 million German POWs, Europe's partition. Nuremberg hanged him justly, the trapdoors snap a requiem, history indicts eternally, his Bendlerblock office now a resistance memorial. His shadow endures, a clarion that command demands candor amid chaos, that integrity outranks indulgence in authority's glare, that truth is not luxury, its lifeline, lest temporary setbacks become tombs for nations. To forsake it is to court not just failure, but apocalypse.